Hello, my name is Rob and welcome to Directors Uncut. If this is your first episode, we put filmmakers from all corners of the globe onto a huge list that covers everything from Shaw Brothers icons to Nollywood nonsense. Then we turn it into a lottery of directors, and by using a random number generator we pick a name out of the hat, whatever name comes out. Myself and guest hosts discuss them and their work through two films. And before I introduce who those two people are, this is another one from the Patreon archive. There's one more to go, and then there's a new recording, and then it's just straight Patreon migrations through to the 1st of July. I think we'll be taking a little break, whether it's scheduled to be a month, but we'll see how it goes. We'll see how things play out between now and then. So yeah, let's introduce who I've been joined by this week.
Graham
and Aidan.
Hello. How have you two been since the last time we met?
Yeah, all right. I mean, I'm beset by seagulls, as we've been saying before the show. So if you hear any frenzied squawking, it probably is me, actually. But also the seagulls are likely to make a bit of a racket.
And as for me, I've just been stuck in my man cave in Durham as per usual. So for the last 2 weeks.
You've been isolating?
No. I've just been stuck in my man cave because I haven't had any work for the last couple of weeks.
So the lock's broken.
Yes.
Question: have you ever had the thing, Graham, when a bird just flies into your window? Because I've never had it with seagulls. I've had it with other birds, but not seagulls.
Oh, yeah. Seagulls, I think, would just crash straight through the window. They're indestructible. But yeah, I've had like sparrows and other smaller, stupider birds do it.
Yeah, because I'm surprised. Like, if a seagull does it, it's probably going to give up the ghost that it's actually just a guy in disguise and not actually a bird.
Yes.
We'll ruffle the feathers and then just walk off.
But this is apt, isn't it? Because this week we are talking about the first seagull to direct a mainstream movie, Don Siegel.
Yes, Don Siegel.
That is the strangest segue I've ever seen. But I've seen you come up with some very strange segues.
That's what they pay me the big bucks for on this podcast.
Yeah, Don Siegel, what's our exposure with this guy?
Why? I think when we were planning it out, I said I'd seen 4 films. I'd seen Dirty Harry, I'd seen Invasion of the Body Snatchers. There's another one that slipped my mind, but also Charlie Varrick. I got Charlie Varrick ages ago for the site when Indicator put a version of it out, and that's a really interesting kind of atypical 70s crime film. I was really struck by that.
As for me, I've only seen one, and it was his first collaboration with Clint Eastwood. And it's not a film that a lot of people know about, but Coogan's Bluff.
Oh, yeah. I know the title, but not much else.
Yeah, not one of his biggest commercial hits, but still pretty interesting nonetheless. Kind of like a Chicago crime film, but disguised as a Western.
It's one of those movies that you always get confused, like Coogan's Bluff and Mulligan's Run, and I don't know. What guy with surname is often doing a lot of things in American cinema.
It's good to see Steve Coogan's having some hits over in the States, isn't it?
Well, yeah, he keeps busy. The only one I've seen besides the 2 that we are doing today is The Killers, which is one. I think it was Ernest Hemingway adaptation. That it's one of those movies that's been done a lot.
Yeah,
it's a good movie. Okay, so I guess we just jump right into it, really. I mean, last month on the podcast, this section of the show lasted about 20 minutes because, the one before last, it was an anime episode. And asking Prob about anime, it's like, I've got to course correct, this is going too smoothly.
Yes.
Proceeds for the next hour to talk about one Makoto Shinkai film.
It's like, what have you seen before? Well, allow me to take you back to the genesis of hand-drawn animation as a medium.
What was that movie?
Everything.
I think it was a Spike Milligan one, wasn't it? Not Spike Milligan, Spike Jonze. Funny how those still get mixed up. It says, take us back to how this story began. I think it was adaptation.
It's in adaptation. Yeah.
It goes back to the beginning of time.
Yes.
I was going to say, and being John Malkovich. No, John Malkovich wouldn't do something like that.
Yes, but how do we want to do this? We've got 2 movies. We are doing Escape from Alcatraz and the earlier of the 2 of Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
I think we could stand to do Escape from Alcatraz first, because in some ways it feels like a more straightforward film, if that isn't tipping my hand too much.
Alcatraz, the Rock. No one has ever escaped from this prison. This is Frank Morris. Armed robbery, burglary, grand larceny. Morris has escaped from many prisons, but Alcatraz could be the exception.
I smell something burning.
I'm looking for a new punk.
Good luck.
You don't understand. I just found her.
I guess anything you want bad enough is worth the chance.
Including busting out.
Some men are destined never to leave Alcatraz alive.
This island is solid rock.
No one's ever busted out.
No one's ever made it.
Escape from Alcatraz is the easiest synopsis we've ever had on the show. Right, Escape from Alcatraz, which is based on the book Escape from Alcatraz, is about some people who escape from Alcatraz.
Perfect. You can't really say much. There's like Clint Eastwood's in there. The guy from Tremors, before he had a mustache, is in there. There's all sorts of people in there.
I only read like a few days ago that this was Danny Glover's first film as well.
It was, yeah. I think you have to have very sharp eyes to catch him. He's just sort of one of the random inmates in there. But yeah, his first screen appearance.
So what did we think of this one?
Well, I went in because I have kind of a problem with prison movies in general. I think like the range of things they can be about and the range of ways they can be about them is kind of narrow, in my opinion.
Not literally like the tunnels that the prisoners dig out from underneath their cells, but...
No, although that's a pretty good metaphor for me slogging through another prison movie.
Yeah, I'd put them on that sort of a subgenre. I'd put on a level with movies with interrogation scenes or court scenes.
Courtroom drama is a very good point, because it's like prison movies, there are precisely two possible endings to this thing, and it's about marking time until you get there. I think actually the interesting thing about the true story this is based on, which is only sort of touched upon at the end of this film, is that they never found out if the real people escaped. Now, I was a bit perplexed by that, because either you have or you haven't.
That asks more questions than anything. If they don't know the true story, where's all this information coming from?
Yeah, I mean...
What are they basing this on?
I have no idea. I hadn't read about this case before, but I'm sure there is a fair bit of fictionalization going on here.
As far as I'm aware, the real case it's basically like not necessarily a biopic, but like I said, like a fictionalized version of those events. So it was 60s or something like that, where three men tried to escape from, well, as Graham said, Alcatraz. There's not much more you can say about that, but it's really like a more dramatic retelling of that story. Of I think the main head honcho that Clint Eastwood plays is a person called Frank Morris.
And what are our feelings towards Eastwood, by the way? Because he's a deeply interesting guy, I think.
Not a fan.
Well, yeah.
I think if you have that love of Westerns, there's like a ground level for you to get in on his filmography, because honestly, he just gets less and less interesting once he stopped doing Westerns. And then when he started becoming a director, and then when he becomes solely a director, he's lost his mind. So it's like he's got his downward trajectory is basically the Alps. It just starts high and then shoop. There's no little kick at the end where he does a jump. It's just straight down. And not liking Westerns to begin with, I'm not a big fan.
Well, I've got to admit, I love Eastwood. I've been a big fan since, goodness me, how long now? Since in my teenage years, really. And he's probably one of the only big movie stars or action stars. Like, and I know a lot of people, used to go for, say like Jean-Claude Van Damme or Sylvester Stallone, people of the prime day of the 80s. But for me, Eastwood just had much more wry sense of humor about it for me. and that's what I do prefer. There was just something more bankable that I found with Eastwood, and I really do love the dude.
Yeah, I mean, Rob touched on the big reason why I'm a fan of Clint Eastwood there, because I am a fan of Westerns, and if you're a fan of Westerns, he's one of the big two actors of the genre, along with John Wayne. But what I do like about Clint Eastwood and what keeps me going through some periods where he is being, and let's be honest here, fucking maddening on several levels, is that he is a really hard guy to pin down. I mean, I compare him to John Wayne. I'm growing more and more fond of John Wayne as I grow older and I get deeper into John Ford's back catalogue. But John Wayne never did anything like the Bridges of Madison County. Clint Eastwood keeps on taking these big, weird gambles with a pretty set-in-stone screen persona. And sometimes it's an embarrassment. Sometimes it doesn't work at all. But when it does, it's really staggering.
Yeah. Like that whole, I mean, even like some of his misfires are interesting, but they're still completely misfires. Remember like a couple of years back when he made, what was it, the 1517 to Paris or something like that?
Oh, yes.
And then cast the actual heroes of the event.
Starring people who aren't actors, and by the time you finish watching, you'll work out why they're not actors. Yes, that was weird.
Yeah, that was a bizarre choice, but okay.
He's solid in this, though.
He is, isn't he? Yeah.
It's not a particularly showy performance. I think this is probably his the end of his golden era, really, as a screen performer. Because it doesn't really require much from him. He's quite stoic and, he's a man of very, very few words.
For me, this is always what I love about Eastwood, that he's very capable of understanding that sometimes the most impactful roles are the ones where you don't have big actorly histrionics or anything. He can do a lot with a little.
Yeah.
But in terms of whether it escapes that kind of prison drama vibe, a bit, I would say that a lot of what impressed me about it, although I do agree that Eastwood is good in here, a lot of what impressed me about it is down to Siegel. And he gives it that kind of laid-back 70s crime movie feel, despite the fact that it is about people escaping from Alcatraz. This shouldn't be that relaxed.
Yeah, I mean, even then, it does keep true to what prison drama cliche, or even then, like prison in general. I mean, like, for example, when prisoners have to strip down naked to take a shower together, or that kind of thing. But even,
I genuinely wonder if, like, American prisons just have an assigned rapist. It feels like there's precisely one in every prison, if you believe prison dramas. And as soon as that big fat guy walked over to Eastwood in the shower, I just thought, fuck it, here we go again.
Yeah. Introducing a character by, here you go, these what Clint Eastwood looks like naked. It's one of these things that I thought I was going to, get into when watching this. So Thanks for that.
And co-starring Clint Eastwood's buttocks.
And that is kind of a thing of the era, though, isn't it? I mean, if this was made at a point, it would have had a body double, but that's kind of
there's a kind of reckless, gritty kind of 70s quality to it, yeah.
I mean, the 70s are probably the best era for, people don't call it the golden era, they call it New Hollywood. I think the golden era is sort of the 30s and 40s sort of era, 20s, 30s, 40s. But I think this is the golden point for Hollywood movies, because I don't know whether I'd describe this as dangerous, but for a prison movie of this era, or the eras before it, they tended to paint prisoners as romantic gadabouts, as they went to prison, for some romantic gesture, or just being a little bit too much of a sap, or, they really played up the idea. But there's no such thing here, really. I mean, it has off these little moments scattered throughout it where it tells people about the stories of why they went to prison, whether he killed, the black guy killed two white guys who, fronted to him. Or the other one, Butts, I think it's called, who kept on stealing cars, and the person who annoyed him, so he thought he'd steal his car and he rode over county lines. Or Clint Eastwood, he just drives over, he just keeps on escaping prison.
Yeah,
Not so it's necessarily dangerous, but raw.
Yeah, I mean, compare it to something like The Shawshank Redemption, where there is a lot of effort made to try and persuade you that, the heroes in this movie aren't that bad, honestly. And I think Siegel realizes that you're on a hiding to nothing with trying to do that with this story, because you don't get sent to Alcatraz on a technicality.
No. I mean, I think that plays into its tone, really, because when you're talking about prison movies, technically, or traditionally, I should say, you have multiple people in the same cell.
Yeah.
In this, I don't know how true it is to reality. It's one person per cell, and it sort of takes out a little of the energy, I think.
Yeah, I'll go with that. Yeah.
It's where they do the job in the where they're doing carpentry or in the library or in the yard. But other than that, they're just in the prison cells on their own. And when they're in the prison cells on their own, we see lots of shots of them sanding things, pulling things, burning things. Not for me, unfortunately.
It's a good carpentry movie. Maybe they should have got Harrison Ford to star in it. But yeah, I know what you mean. I hadn't thought of that, actually, but now you've said it, it made me think a bit about Alex Wheatle, that episode of Small Axe, where he ends up in a prison with someone who he at first seems to be very different to, and the interplay with them really lifts that film for me. But yeah, you're right, there's nothing like that in here.
I mean, I'm just going to come back and say I'm not a fan of this, but it is competing with two factors. I don't like prison movies, and I'm not a particular fan of Clint Eastwood.
Yeah, I think that for me, the fact that I'm on the opposite side of the fence with the second one lifted the first one a bit, but still not enough. It's a very long film for what it is, isn't it? For a film whose ending is in the title, it goes on a bit.
How about you, Aidan?
I've got to admit, I've really enjoyed Escape from Alcatraz because, and I'll tell you one thing, because of its straightforward nature, and I'm not expecting say, for example, obviously not to like Clint Eastwood, because I've stated it before, I love the guy. But for me, for it to fall in this category where it's very easygoing, it's very easy to understand for me. And for the longest time with the lockdowns and everything, I just feel as if prison movies have been my thing lately. Just trying to break out of this hellhole. So,
yeah.
Because I had the same feeling with Midnight Express as well, the Alan Parker film. Recently, and that had a very similar quality to me, and I just found it quite easy to understand and quite obviously provocative of what we're going through at this day and age.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I mean, as far as all eras of prison movies, this is probably the strongest because it does have that raw quality to it without becoming a parody of itself. When you get into the 90s, the noughties now, I don't really need to say anything about the prison dramas of these eras because they're trying to be edgy. Everybody's swearing and shanking each other, and there's lots of horrible scenes in the shower of dropping soap. So yes, I get it. You're trying to be dark enough.
Yes.
But this is the right point, I think, in that sort of sliding scale.
I think so, yeah, and I think it does have some very interesting features. The score by Jerry Fielding, who did a lot of Sam Peckinpah's films, does feel a bit like it got lost on the way to a Nigel Neal adaptation, which is interesting.
Yeah, because when the score does creep in, it's very, very subtle and very quiet for that matter. So all it is sometimes just a raise of a pin sometimes, and half the other time it's just stone echoey always. And where's the score?
It's got that kind of creepy, almost hauntological vibe, which I think again is what Rob's talking about. It's making it at this time, gives it this score that no other era would think of putting over a prison movie.
It's was it on Eclectica or is it in this when we did The Driver? And it had that Quincy Jones score, and it's what is this and why is it here?
Oh, yeah, that was The Getaway, wasn't it? One of the late Eclecticas we did, which, yeah, you're right. It's such a nasty little movie, and it has this really lavish, funky Quincy Jones score. So weird.
It's just that era, yeah. So any closing thoughts on this? On Escape from Alcatraz? I almost said to Escape from New York there. That's where my mind is, I guess.
Yeah.
A couple of things. I think when I say that the things that I like about it are mostly attributable to Siegel, I'm talking about like really subtle directorial grace notes, like the way that he informs us that the authorities are aware that Eastwood's character is smart and dangerous, is that it stays on Patrick McGowan as the prison governor for a while after Eastwood has left following their first meeting. And McGowan starts to clip his nails. And Siegel kind of draws this out a bit because he knows that you're sat there thinking, why am I watching a man cut his nails in a prison movie again? What's this supposed to imply? And that's when the camera sort of slowly creeps in on that little typewritten paper saying IQ superior. And it's like, maybe there just wasn't enough of that stuff for me, but when it came, I was really grateful for it. And the other thing is that the war movie they watch is Hell is for Heroes, directed by Don Siegel, which came out in the year that the real Alcatraz breakout happened. So Don Siegel is technically a character in this movie.
Aidan, any closing thoughts?
Just the same riff as before, really. Just really enjoyed it for how straightforward it was. And there's just nothing more that you can do to ask about that, because I do like this period of Clint Eastwood's career an awful lot. So it worked for me. That's all I can really add.
Okie doke. All good then. Three very different perspectives.
Con bloodsucker. You're going to have to do your own dirty work now. Do you hear me? Do you?
Kirk, you're still alive, my old friend.
Still, old friend. You've managed to kill just about everyone else, but like a poor marksman, you keep missing the target.
Perhaps I no longer need to try.
Oh no! Let go, he can't take it! Khan. Khan, you've got Genesis. But you don't have me. You are going to kill me, Khan. You're going to have to come down here. You're going to have to come down here.
I've done far worse than kill you. I've hurt you. And I wish to go on hurting you. I shall leave you as you left me, as you left her, marooned for all eternity in the center of a dead planet. Buried alive, buried alive.
Hello again, just taking a little break from proceedings with Graham and Aidan and Don Siegel to just do a little bit of mid-roll and bit of housekeeping here. Coming up soon, next week is Nicholas Meyer, best known for The Wrath of Khan. Not being interested in that sort of thing, we don't cover that, we come from a little bit of a different perspective. Then there's a new recording, and then after that is Mark Duplass, which we had to be a little bit more creative with on account of if we just talked about two Mumblecore movies, I think it'd have been the angriest podcast in existence, at least the most annoyed, I'm not sure which. So yeah, we covered a movie there which he produced rather than directed, and word to the warning, fans of a certain beloved found footage movie, we might annoy you with that one because we don't have a particularly positive opinion on it. I imagine people who know the movie know what I'm talking around, so yeah, there's that. Also, yeah, there's loads of episodes coming up, but once we have that break, I think it'll be from the first Friday of July to the first Friday of August. We'll be doing something completely new in the second season. We get opportunities for interviews with directors, so we'll be dropping bonus episodes in the feed with new filmmakers, up-and-coming filmmakers. So look forward to that in your feed, dropping in your feed. But when we go back to season 2, or when we hit season 2, I should say, it will be 2 weeks every episode. So, those bonus episodes will help fill out the feed and give you extra content for the show. So I think that's about it for housekeeping, besides the usual stuff of, if you want to keep up to date with what's coming up on the show, follow me on social media, on Twitter at _RJ Simpson, or on Instagram at Directors Uncut Pod. And if you have any messages that you want to send through, you can comment on me, or send me messages on social media, or you can email us direct at directorsuncutpod@gmail.com. Where, if it's okay with the people listening, I'd like to include those messages on the show. So continuing that theme, I do want to push you, if you're enjoying this show, to both subscribe, and that does help, but also to give the show a rating or review. A rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, that helps a lot, but helping just as much is on Spotify. If you've listened to half an hour of the podcast, any podcast on this run, you can give the show a rating. So please, 5 stars. 5 stars would be very nice. Thank you very much. And I think that is about it, really. So let's jump into the second movie of this Don Siegel episode with myself, Graham and Aidan.
But will you tell these fools I'm not crazy? Make them listen to me before it's too late! Listen to me. Please listen. If you don't, if you won't, if you fail to understand, then the same incredible terror that's menacing me will strike at you!
No, you've got to get out of here, please!
They come from another world, spawned in the light years of space, unleashed to take over the bodies and souls of the people of our planet, bringing a new dimension in terror to the giant super scope screen.
Whatever intelligence or instinct it is that can govern the forming of human flesh and blood out of thin air is fantastically powerful, beyond any comprehension.
A cursed, dreadful, malevolent thing was happening to those he loved.
This isn't just an ordinary body, is it?
I never saw one like it. It looks unused.
Right, so that leads us nicely onto the second of Don Siegel's movies, and the earlier of the two, and the earliest of the Invasion of the Body Snatchers movies.
Yes.
This one was going to get called Body Snatcher, but there was a 1945 movie by Robert Wise before that.
What a coincidence.
It got called, yeah, that is actually kind of a weird bit of serendipity, isn't it? Called Body Snatchers, so yeah, that's how the name Invasion of the Body Snatchers was born. And yeah, this is the first of 3 movies of that name. There's probably way more that use this trope, this archetype.
There's 4 that are adapted from the Jack Finney story. There's the Philip Kaufman Invasion of the Body Snatchers with Donald Sutherland. There's the Abel Ferrara Body Snatchers from the 90s, and there was one that got mangled by the studio that was just called The Invasion with Daniel Craig and Nicole Kidman back in the noughties.
The 1990s one is worth a shout if you haven't seen it before. It's very
I've
interesting.
never got round to that. I would love to get round to that, because that is quite a weird period, isn't it? That moment where people seem to think that Abel Ferrara was about ready to become a mainstream director.
Yeah, he's not.
From a guy who started, I think, making porn films in like the 60s or something like that.
He started in porn films and went up the ladder of respectability to make a video nasty. And at some point, people thought, yeah, let's give him our science fiction franchise.
He managed it okay.
Yeah.
But it comes from a very, very different place. The 1950s one, I don't know if you know this, but it's about communism.
Well, there's the thing, isn't it? Because Jack Finney apparently said that he was not thinking of any kind of allegorical reading when he wrote it.
Oh, no, it's just the time that you make something creates the meaning. You know, imagine there's movies now about made 2 or 3 years ago about isolation, but because they were released now, they've suddenly become COVID movies. It's just the way it is. But yes, this one stars Kevin McCarthy as a doctor, and pod people come, and I don't really know how to explain it. And it becomes very, very paranoid. People start turning into pod people. They get replaced, and subtextually, at least, it's very much a McCarthyism. The communists are coming. Look after your children. The communists are coming.
Although part of that reading comes from, sorry, spoilers, listeners, but it is Invasion of the Body Snatchers. You know, it came out in the 1950s. I think we're safe. But part of that reading comes from the ending where they sort this all out just by calling the FBI, and Siegel had to be pressed into making that against his will by the producers. I think that's the bit that makes it feel a bit like it's, you know, saying, hey, shop your neighbours to the feds if you think they're commies. But without that, it's kind of ambiguous, isn't it? Are these pod people communists, or are they like the ultimate suburban conformists? It's not quite clear, and I like that.
Yeah, Aidan, what did you think of this one?
I liked Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but I have to confess that I didn't love it on the same level as I did, or enjoy it at least on the same level as I did Alcatraz.
Okay.
And I don't know whether that's just because of me, not getting the grips, because obviously I found it just hard to accept it with it being pod people. I mean, I don't know whether it's just the thing, but it's just by people just talking a very unnatural way, just to signify the things, just to signify that they're alien. I just couldn't get an understanding of why. You know what I mean? It's just one of those things that I just found.
Oh yeah, I mean it's understandable, because as science fiction grew and became more expensive and had more ideas a part of it, otherness was communicated in better ways than talking a bit faster. So remove all of that development and go back to where it all began. It could feel a bit quaint.
And because nowadays, if you see someone who appears human but just lacks all requisite emotion, you just assume it's Keir Starmer. But back then, it was something people hadn't seen.
I would totally accept Keir Starmer as a body snatcher. Totally accept that.
This is from an era of sci-fi. You mentioned Nigel Neal earlier. This is very much from his era, the Quatermass era of sci-fi.
Absolutely, yeah. And I wondered recently whether I was a bit over that, because I'd seen some 50s B movies. I'd seen The Wasp Woman, which is a Roger Corman movie, and oh boy, I hate to spoil what that one's about, but I think you can probably work it out.
B-Man.
So it's an A24 movie about the family unit and times being hard.
Yes. Yeah. Ari Aster's The Wasp Woman. Yeah. 8 hours long. And I watched it and I thought, all right, I'm sure this is very good if you can read all of the stuff about, anxieties over women joining the workforce after World War II and second wave feminism and the PR industry, if you read all that into it. But isn't that reading that amount of stuff into it is basically the same as just making up your own better movie in your head? And I'd become kind of disenchanted with that era of science fiction cinema. But I watched Invasion of the Body Snatchers again, and I thought, no, this is terrific, actually. This is a really purposefully made, well-told story where when I look at it and I see all that stuff about McCarthyism and the Red Scare, I don't feel like I'm conning myself into liking this thing.
And I mean, it's got a motor in it. It's kind of the very opposite of Escape from Alcatraz. That is a very deliberate, very considered, patient movie where every little gesture means something. Like a flower can have such huge significance. And in this, usually in a sort of movie, we'd have half an hour getting to know the characters, and then it'd slowly start doling out little tips, little clues, little things that are happening. No, this thing pretty much starts running the second it starts. It's just instantly at it.
Yeah, and for 80 minutes as well, that you got to credit like people like Siegel for that, to keep it so tightly paced and considered.
Absolutely,
as well.
Yeah.
And it has some interesting scenes as well. You know, the pod people probably became the most famous from the 1970s version, which in my that's the masterpiece.
I'd
Absolutely.
go with that. Yeah.
But this, it still has some very interesting ideas. It's quite progressive with the relationship dynamics between Kevin McCarthy and the love interest.
Yeah.
Because that time was sort of very white picket fence America, where everybody is ultra conservative, but having like relationships out of wedlock here. I mean, they're really pushing the standards for the time. This is an era which probably in the Hays Code.
Yeah, the Hays Code will still be in force now. It disintegrated sometime in, I don't remember exactly when, early 60s, I think.
Yeah, so at the back end of it. So it's characters who, in the eyes of, let's be honest, the Hays Code was, if you're not an upstanding white man,
yeah,
you can't have a positive story about you.
Yes.
And it creates interesting subtext for the time, I think, beyond that sort of McCarthyism, where it's having these characters which wouldn't have time of day or would be a supporting character or wouldn't even be a character in another film like this.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think is easy to forget about it, because of course we all know the twist, we all know what's going on here now. But for the first half an hour or so, there's an uncertainty about whether there really is anything kind of science fictional going on here. These people could just be driven mad by living in modern suburbia. And I thought when it's about that, and there's this very precise framing, there's a lot of symmetry, there's a lot of, as Rob says, the kind of white picket fence iconography. That still feels really subversive, and that hasn't dated. I think if you put that next to a modern American indie about the same subject matter like Vivarium, say, or Ham on Rye, they're still basically mining the same themes and addressing them in a similar kind of a way.
Yeah. There's also the, how do I word this? There's, when they start working out that there's aliens, it comes across some sort of psychological things. The idea that that's not my uncle, it's just somebody who looks like my uncle.
Yeah.
And because it frames it as a doctor being the lead character, it's very, very unique, much in the same way that the 1990s version takes place in sort of a military barracks. So it can present a very, very unique view of the world because of who the characters are and where the story's set, which is interesting.
Capgras delusion is what it is, which is a real, albeit very rare, psychological disorder where you, for some reason, you become convinced that people you know are not, in fact, the people that they say they are. That's a real thing.
Yeah, and it's very progressive as well, really.
Yeah.
For a movie to use a rare or mental health condition in a mainstream, which is probably an expensive movie. Because let's not forget, I mean, the world has always been the progressive place it is now. Once upon a time, you know, if you had a mental illness, you just told to shut up and man up.
Yeah, grit your teeth, get on with it. Yeah.
For a Hollywood movie to sort of sneak in something like this.
But the way Siegel lingers on that as well, I mean, I think the opening case with, I believe it's like Uncle Ira, who's the person who the girl is having troubles saying that, obviously, look, he may look and talk like my uncle, but there's no emotion.
Yeah.
There's no feeling with what he says. That can be quite telling very, very early on that this isn't like your bog standard alien invasion movie. I think there's real thought to it as well.
Yeah, I think it has a really uncanny quality. I just wondered, we've talked about the other versions. We've talked about the Ferrara version a bit, but which of the other versions have we all seen? Because I've only seen this and the Kaufman one.
3, and not the one which you called the Invasion. That's the only one I haven't seen, but yeah, the other 3.
As for me, I've only seen this one. So
you've got a surprise in for you for the 78 one.
The 78 one is smashing, but it's almost the one that kind of breaks the pattern, because there's this easy explanation of the Body Snatchers films that every time they're remade, the pod people represent something different. And, in this one, they're communists. In the 90s one, it's a kind of military-industrial complex metaphor. But the 78 one is kind of interesting because it's more interested in the society around this. It just says, what if we took the exact same threat from the 56 film and just put it down in late 70s San Francisco? And I mean, the main difference is that absolutely no one's calling the FBI in 70s San Francisco. Nobody trusts law enforcement to sort this thing out at all.
That is such a weird thing, though, isn't it, for the 50s version? Because it was supposed to end when he's running around the road saying, they're here, they're here.
Yeah.
And the studio says, yeah, you're not doing that. That's bleak. What if the phone, the FBI, we're onto something.
As duff as that ending is, and as much as I think it is the film's Achilles heel, I will say that the other bit of the wraparound story, the bit at the start where Kevin McCarthy's in the asylum, is really great. And it really gets you wondering what the hell's going to happen that lands this guy in this smart, professional, intelligent, sensitive guy. What makes him into this raving, institutionalized maniac?
Yeah, I have heard the reading of the 70s one, how it's kind of a reaction against the suburbs in America, because all of the communities went out into the suburbs and it left the inner city in the state that it was, and it just projecting the 50s values that run out of the suburbs into this place, which just, it's not there anymore. It's projecting it into a completely opposite world, and how all these sort of components intermingle with one another. Which from an American, the Americans understand this movie more than we do, I think.
Yeah.
But this 50s one, it's a bit more universal.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. Yeah, like the character of Dr. Kaufman, the guy who comes in and basically, he's that classic science fiction expert who just says, okay, nothing to see here, guys. This is all explicable by, our current science. And in the 70s version, he's this fabulous pop psych fraud played by Leonard Nimoy, who was just having the time of his fucking life in that movie, man. But in this, you're right, Kaufman is more of a kind of universal authority figure, and you don't really need to know what the public image of a psychiatrist was in 50s America to see him come on and think, all right, this is that guy. This is that guy who's going to do that thing in the story.
It also has some sort of great sense of threat seeded throughout it. In the other ones, it's kind of like, okay, you're the last ones alive. You are knackered. Everybody's coming for you. You don't stand the chance. They don't really have that in this, but there is a really, really well staged scene where Kevin McCarthy and I can't remember the love interest, they've run into this mines. This mine shaft, and realise that they're being followed. So they go under the sort of footway in this little cavern underneath it where all the wooden boards go overboard, and it just shows you, looking up, all these people running past them, and the number of people that are after them. Nothing really happens. It's just people running. But the way it's been staged, it's expert direction.
Dana Winter is the actress playing Becky. Yeah.
It's an incredibly tense scene, but when you break it down, nothing's happening. But it's great blocking, great staging, great direction.
No, I think it's true. And, this is made in the mid-50s, so it's a time when film noir is still current. We're towards the end of the film noir cycle. And I think part of what gives it a flavour is that it does feel like a science fiction movie that's made according to film noir rules. It has that same sense of compositional tension and storytelling discipline that isn't... I mean, you see a lot of B movies from around this time that are even shorter than this, but they feel really padded. They know that they have 2 or 3 big shock sequences, and the rest is just people waffling on and looking at test tubes. But this isn't that. This is a proper thriller all the way through.
Yeah, I mean, I like all 3 of the movies, so really you can't go wrong. And it's nice that it's finally got a proper release. BFI are putting out a Blu-ray of it, so
are they? I didn't know that.
It's going to have all the extras in the universe.
Yes. I think it's got a nasty edge too, actually. That's another thing that I liked about it. Like, before it becomes obvious that it's aliens, which, as I say, happens quite late in the film, there's a lot of talk about people getting ice picks in the brain and having fingerprints burned off with acid, when they're trying to think of logical, real-world explanations for what's going on. I think it has that quality where, as you say, Rob, Hays Code, there's a limit to what they can actually show, but there's a constant feeling that you might be about to see something very nasty indeed.
Yeah.
Okay, so any closing thoughts on that one, Aidan?
No, I mean, I think pretty much nailed it on the head. I think the only thing that I do like about it is just how precise, again, it goes back to the direction you mentioned earlier, Rob. Like, for example, there's like a cut on, I think it's like Jack's hand, who was like the friend of the doctor character or something like that, and it bleeds, initially bleeds, and then it mirrors almost immediately with another shot, like a much later scene where we do actually see the cut on the hand from obviously the corpse. Well, what we initially suspect is like a corpse, but turns out it's not. It's like nothing at all. It's like the alien host's body, obviously building up to a greater level or something like that. That stuff I'd like. I mean, I like, obviously, the subtler things that lead you down this path. Yeah.
One of the subtler things it does is the way it looks at sleep and makes sleep an enemy. And one of the characters says, "I can't escape sleep," and that's horrible. I think one of the characters says, you can't stop us, we're coming, and it's going to happen. Yeah, that's pretty savage for a 1950s. When you talk about 1950s sci-fi, we're talking about invaders from the planet X.
Yes. But that's the same core figure as Nightmare on Elm Street, isn't it? That's remarkably ahead of its time, that you take something that everyone does that is totally inevitable and you make people scared to do it. That's great.
Any closing thoughts from you, Graham?
I just want to talk about how amazing it is that the woman who did the score for this is called Carmen Dragon.
Wow. As far as the name lottery goes, she just won that, didn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really standout piece of 1950s sci-fi, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. I really enjoyed this.
I find directing very dull and boring. It's totally consuming of your time. You have to be where the action is. It's much easier to sit down and write about climbing the Eiger Mountain in bitter cold and then sliding all the way down and then going 10 fathoms under the sea and then crawling across the burning desert. But as a director, I've got to be climbing the mountain. I've got to slide down the mountain. I've got to go 10 fathoms under the sea. I've got to climb, crawl across the hot burning desert. And I don't enjoy directing. I really don't. I don't know where I am. They pick me up. It's dark in the morning. They take me to the location. And they bring me back. It's dark. And people say, how do you like working in London?
Don Siegel, what are our feelings on him?
Yeah, because, I mean, I only see, like I said before, I've only seen Coogan's Bluff beforehand. So this is my vision. The Body Snatchers was my second, Escape from Alcatraz is my third. He's one of these American filmmakers who you don't really see on the high echelon of like talent of that era. So think of like Sidney Lumet or Robert Altman, people from that era. You don't really see, I think, the same namesakes as like Siegel. And I don't know whether that's because obviously he had a tendency directing crime films or anything of that matter. But for someone who's like really consistent at it, he's really good at it, I think. Really good at making, like, not pinning down to himself as, like, say, like one genre of film. Yeah.
Rob used the word journeyman earlier, which we were also talking about on our Robert Wise episode. But I think Siegel feels like a different kind of journeyman to Wise. Wise is one of those astonishing chameleons where you can throw him, Shirley Jackson's novel, The Haunting, and you can throw him the script for The Sound of Music, and he'll do both of them brilliantly, but they are so completely different, and he is so completely led by what the story is and what the tone of that particular story is rather than what he wants to do. Whereas Siegel, I think, has a discernible directorial personality. He's kind of laid back. He's got a kind of dark sense of humour. He's quite macho, but not overbearingly so. There's a reason why he keeps collaborating with Clint Eastwood, I guess is what I'm saying here, who has all of these qualities as well. But it's very strange. I mean, on paper, we've just watched two very different films, but in a strange way, they do feel like they kind of have the same vibe.
Yeah, it's that rawness, isn't it? Yeah, which doesn't really stand out quite as much in a 70s movie because everything was like that.
Yeah.
But in the 50s, he was 20 years ahead of his time, really, making a movie like that.
Yeah.
Because outside of the sort of noirisms, you could pretty much plop that movie early 70s, late 60s, change basically nothing, and it'd still feel in tune with the times.
Completely, yeah. I think there's a reason why Body Snatchers remakes seem to happen on a 20-year cycle. And in the case of the first two, if they'd remade Invasion of the Body Snatchers in the 60s, there would be no point because Siegel's version still looks completely current.
Yeah, very, very interesting director. He was kind of timeless in many, many regards.
Yeah.
You can't say that for many of his peers, really.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
It's so ugly.
You know, when I was a kid, I would have loved to have lived in a place like this.
What's in there?
That's the cellar.
It's filthy.
I like to think of it as character.
Mom, Dad, get me out!
Hang on, Ellie.
Dad, come on! Mom, get me out! I'm done here.
I need you to watch Steven tonight.
So you're leaving us here on our first night?
Go down and check the circuit breaker.
No, I'm scared.
There's 10 steps to the bottom. Count each step. Can you do that?
1, 2.
You're doing great, Ellie. Keep counting.
3.
Ellie!
Ellie!
Now, in the back half of the show, we do the bit where we talk about the movies that we've been watching recently. This week, we have been joined by Will. Hello there.
Hi there.
And making his debut, no less.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
An absolute pleasure. And also joining him, Vincent. Hello there.
You gotta ask yourself one question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, Rob?
Well, no, because technology.
You know, that's because you're not using the most powerful podcasting software in the world. Whatever that is.
And lastly, but not least, is Kat. Hello.
Hi, I mean, I can't follow that, so just hello.
Well, he has a habit of upstaging everybody, Vincent. If you never listened to the Christmas episode, he did the best sort of 12 movies of... how would you describe that?
Oh, is that my the top 12 films of 2021?
Yes, it was excellent.
As like the 12 Days of Christmas. I do it every year. So there's something to look forward to December of this year, listeners. Hey.
Yeah. Yes, it is quite something. I didn't see it coming. But anyhow, this is the part of the show where we talk about movies, TV, whatever it might be that we've been watching recently, that we just take 30 minutes or so to just have a chat about. So, who wants to jump in first on this one?
Well, I'm happy to. I watched today, I got around to watching The Sadness.
Oh.
The Taiwanese film. And it was a lot. It's, yeah, I heard all about it, and because it's become infamous. So I thought, right, I'm going to do it. Lunchtime, thought, I'll pop it on. And yeah, it's a lot.
It's one of these things, when movies get notoriety for being extreme in one regard, you think, oh, it's not as bad as my imagination assumes it to be.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot. I mean, like you say, you hear about these extreme films and things, but there is some stuff in this which is pretty much as extreme as quote unquote mainstream, but you won't see much. It's incredibly gory and violent, and yeah, there's whatever you could think of is pretty much in the film. it's a lot.
Yeah, it's even more when the protagonist shares your name, because the protagonist is called Kat. So that was a really fun watch.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an ideal lunchtime watch, I would say that. Maybe not the best choice, but I thought I had the opportunity to watch it. I'll take the opportunity with my scrambled eggs on toast, and it wasn't ideal. I'm not going to lie.
I'm so glad you said your scrambled eggs on toast and not like your child.
No, I didn't sit down with the kids. That's
horrible movie to walk in on. It sounds like, yeah.
Yeah, no.
What are you watching, Dad?
Yeah. No, we won't be doing that for definite. But it was quite a change of pace because I've got 4 kids, so I do watch a lot of kids' films. So when I get the opportunity when they're in school, I'll stick something on, and that was today's choice. And I'm not sure it was a wise choice, but I watched it. It's not one I'd recommend because it's not for everyone.
Oh yeah. I think the question you got to ask, I think at one point in time, I don't know if it's still true, Brain Dead, Peter Jackson's Brain Dead, I think it's Dead Alive internationally.
Yeah.
Was called the bloodiest film ever made. Does it challenge that?
It's and it's just so nasty. It is. There's nothing fun. Well, depends on your version of fun, but I mean, it's a really nihilistic, nasty film. It's not a fun watch. Whereas Brain Dead is. Yeah,
Brain Dead's an absolute blast.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like there's a virus that is sort of taken people over, and basically they have no morals anymore. So literally anything goes. So they're literally driven by base feelings, primarily like lust and rage. So there's a lot of sexualized violence and content, and a lot of graphic beatings of people. So yeah, it really isn't a lunchtime watch. That was a schoolboy hour.
Well, yeah, to be honest, because I had read the Extreme, and I did think I was going down the road, like you say, of Brain Dead and things, where it was just going to be so I'll pop it on, maybe a bit not fun. Like Brain Dead, like you say, the sexual violence and stuff in it doesn't mess about. And as extreme films go, I mean, if that's your thing, it's well made, and but yeah, it is extreme is the word.
If it's a virus that causes people to I haven't seen it yet, but if a virus causes people to lose all their morals, does that mean they immediately join the Conservative Party?
Oh.
Ooh, satire.
Good, yeah.
I mean, it's set in like an alternate version of Taiwan, and it's already like within sort of like a pandemic sort of setting, but it's the virus sort of mutates. So it is, although like Taiwan was one of the places that actually got the coronavirus under control quite quickly, it is making comments on the other countries that didn't quite do that. It's actually written and directed by a Canadian who lives in Taiwan, so it's quite interesting that it's this foreigner making this film about the country that he's in, and there is a strong political vein to it hidden amongst everything else.
Yeah,
so there is something to think about.
But
there.
it is quite well hidden, because I read that it is comparison because of the political message about things like Night of the Living Dead and but I don't think it's as successful as, because it is a series of horrific scenes with occasional long dialogue. But it's more, it's like a really grotesque sketch show, like horrible. It's just a series of horrible things. But there is a political message, but it's grim.
Yeah, enter with, a warning there, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a bold but a gamble from Shudder to put that on their service. Though,
I don't know if I don't know if it'll go on uncut, because I assume so, because it's getting an uncut release. But I mean, it's like you say, it is bold, because when people talk about extreme films and gore films, there's some on Shudder, but this is nothing like that. This is, like I say, as extreme as you'll get without looking for more underground stuff. It's as extreme as I would imagine Shudder could go on that platform.
Interesting movie to start off with, Laura, because where do you really go from there? Who wants to pick up from the sadness?
I'll go with a total contrast. It's not a new release, but it was a new viewing for me that I watched yesterday morning. I don't have children, but if I did, I would have very happily watched Studio Ghibli's Whisper of the Heart with them.
One of the few I haven't seen, that one.
Yeah, it's steadily making my way through Ghibli's back catalogue, largely prompted by another wonderful podcast, Not Just for Kids, shout out. But yeah, Whisper of the Heart is an enchanting, it's beautiful, it's utterly charming. It's a coming-of-age tale that gets young love with all its awkwardness. It's got a proper sense of bringing yourself forth and giving a proper sense of the difficulties of creativity. And it makes really good use of John Denver song, which, let's face it, is an achievement in and of itself.
I couldn't name a John Denver song, I'll be honest.
Well, I thought I could, because it's weirdly also used in Alien Covenant.
Oh,
I always think the song is called West Virginia, but it isn't. I think personally I've never seen a Studio Ghibli film that I didn't think was superb, and Whisper of the Heart does nothing to change my perspective on that. Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous and lovely, and worth noting, it is not from one of the filmmakers Studio Ghibli are best known for. It's neither by Isao Takahata nor Hayao Miyazaki. Instead, it is directed by Yoshifumu Kondo, who actually only, I believe, completed that one film before he died.
Oh, that's a tragedy, yeah.
It is, yeah. But yeah, it's a superb film that manages to get that lovely balance between, I think, whimsy and serious emotion altogether. So if ever you wanted a really contrasting double bill, I suspect you could do worse than the sadness of Whisper of the Heart. And what would be the third entry in our triple bill here, Kat?
Well, I'm sort of going back to the darkness, so cool. I don't know if we should probably change up the order. So I've recently watched The Innocence, which is released by Signature on the 20th of May. It's going to be like a day and date, select cinemas on digital. It's a Norwegian film. I'm going to massacre the pronunciation of the director-writer. Eskil Vogt? Vogt? I did not study Norwegian. But it's these two young girls, Ida and her non-verbal autistic older sister Anna. They move into a new tower block and they encounter some other children, Ben and Aisha, and they all start developing strange powers. Okay. And it's kind of a little bit Chronicle, a little bit X-Men, a little bit Village of the Damned, a little bit Thelma, but it's really disturbing because it goes to some really dark places, and it's kids doing the things in it that makes it even more disturbing, especially as somebody that has kids. It debuted at Fright Fest Halloween, but I missed it there, so I was sort of caught up on it ahead of the release, and I actually had to stop the film for about 15 minutes after one scene and sort of like take a bit of a breather. So that was that doesn't happen. I mean, I got through the sadness fine. This one, I had to sit and like text my mum for like 10-15 minutes because there's something that happens in it that I guess triggered me. So it's a really beautifully made film. It's set over a Nordic summer, so and it's kids, so everything's pretty much in the daytime, but it taps into that age where you haven't quite developed your morals yet. Because I mean, like, I've got a 3-year-old, and she'll do things sometimes if she doesn't necessarily understand whether it's right or wrong. It's hard for her to fully understand, and this film sort of explores that in slightly older children. And it's like Ida is almost jealous of the attention that her autistic sister is getting, and so she's kind of really mean to her as a way, I guess, to act out, because she doesn't understand that she's jealous. So she does like really mean things, like she'll put like a drawing pin in her shoe to see if she reacts. And then it just pushes it further and further as these kids all find each other and start to sort of push on that darker nature. So it's really worth a watch. And it's got some great practical effects in it. Like I say, these kids have like different powers, but there is a few trauma warnings that people should be aware of. There's some stuff with animals, so I should get that out there. But yeah, if you want, I don't know what mood you have to be in to watch it. It's well worth a watch because it's got some really interesting things to say. But I'm just not sure what the scenario is when you sit down and watch it, because it's quite brutal.
I don't know if you saw Thelma a few years ago. I think it was George Trier before he did The Worst Person in the World. It makes me think of that. I mean, there's some moments in that movie where I'm not going to spoil it. I'm trying to talk around it, but there's a scene out on the ice, which is probably one of the nastiest things I've seen, which sounds like it hits the same sort of note.
Yeah.
Great movie, but it's not the one you sort of openly recommend to people. So I get that. I'll bring the tone down a bit by talking about a movie which I thought was absolutely dreadful. Out on Shudder 2, I don't know whether it's the most recent. No, it's not the most recent one. That'd be The Sadness, wouldn't it? A little bit before that, Brendan Muldooney's The Cellar. From, I don't know when that might have been at Fright Fest, but it has been at Fright Fest previously.
Yeah, it was
Glasgow,
at Glasgow Fright Fest. I saw it there. And I seem to be the only person who liked it.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand why. It's about maths being scary. That's one of the hooks on which it's built. No, that's the wrong one. Alicia Cuthbert
That's the one.
Moves into a new house with her Irish husband. It's a nice house, but there's a dark secret. A dark secret is in somebody who lived there previously sort of used maths and icons to do demon summoning and talk to spirits from other realms. And it has many, many scenes of people just counting down numbers, and they use that as a means for horror. And I know I hated algebra at school, so I thought, yeah, I'm with you there. But when it introduces the big bad, and I want to talk around it, it gets into gods and Jewish folklore, I guess. But when it introduces what the big bad is, I may have laughed. Which, for a horror movie, it's probably the worst reaction you can honestly have. And it's honest laugh as well. It's not like I'm being mean-spirited. It was just silly. It was very, very silly. And the dialogue, it has lots of scenes where people... It's not reactionary dialogue or emotional dialogue. It's dialogue where people will explain exactly what is happening in a very, very expositional dump of information. And I don't like it when they do that.
No, and there's also some questionable character choices as well. So it's about, their older daughter goes missing, and they believe that happened inside the house, but then they don't pay any attention to their younger son.
Yeah, no.
And they just leave him on his own, open to also being taken, and then seem surprised whenever anything starts to maybe happen towards him. So yeah, it's fun. I mean, I'll always watch Cuthbert in anything that she does. So
I mean, she was a huge crush when I was a kid, when I was younger. So it's nice to see her in movies again, but it's not a good movie for her to be in.
No, I spoke to her ahead of this film, and that was like a big tick to speak to Kim Bauer. But it's just it's a shame that it's for this, which wasn't quite as good as perhaps hoped. But Vincent liked it.
Yes,
I did. Yeah. I mean, I found it properly. Atmospheric. I thought the haunted house aspect of it worked very well, and for me, the incorporation of this is going to be given a mathematical explanation. I was like, okay, different, interesting. Let's run with that, see where it goes. And I remember the review I posted of it after seeing it at Fright Fest was, I called it a drip-feed dread delivery of gothic spaces, occult terror, and malevolent mathematics. And I will say, while I get your point, Rob, the bit when the big bad is revealed, I didn't laugh, but I did go, okay, I didn't need to see that. Yeah. However, come the end of it, I thought that is one of the most effective portrayals of something I have ever seen. So in that respect, I did find it properly chilling.
Just one last note. I find it really weird how the PA at the social media influencer group can suddenly decipher ancient Jewish glyphs. I thought that was a cool little silly moment.
Well, it's like that point in Event Horizon when out of this crew of search and rescue people, one of them, played by the wonderful Jason Isaac, says, "Oh, that's Latin." Oh, no one else. Oh, how convenient that you're here. So it's a recurring trope. Somebody around.
Yeah. It's not the worst trope in horror movies. My least favourite is the one where they turn around at the camera at the end and reveal they haven't escaped after all. It just drives me nuts, that one. Okay, so Will, have you got anything else that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I talk about, I watched Ritual this week as well, which I absolutely loved. Because it's been on my watch list for ages. Not Ritual, and that's not the film I watched at all. Relic. I don't know why I said Ritual. Relic. Yeah, I watched Relic. Ritual was the other one I watched last week, but Relic I watched this week. And yeah, I absolutely loved it. It's been on my watch list for ages, and I don't know why I hadn't got around to watching it. But yeah, again, talking about a haunted house, what I did with that is really different. Yeah, I loved it. I don't know if you know the Relic with... it's the Natalie Erica James one. The mother suffering from dementia, and the
three generations.
Yeah, so the three generations go to the same house, and as she becomes the grandmother becomes more volatile, then things become more sinister. But what it does with the idea of dementia and decay, and it's one of the best final scenes I've seen for a long, long time. I loved it.
Okay. So one of those horror films that manages to perfectly get the balance between something being terrifying and also deeply, deeply sad.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fine line to tread. That trick of like you say, being really moving, but also genuinely terrifying in scenes. Really creepy. That sense of dread. But yeah, that final scene, I don't know why but it found it really moving. Yeah, it's just a really, really good film. It's the closest thing to getting that line right, I suppose, is House on Haunted Hill, the Mike Flanagan series. That kind of vibe where really moving.
The Haunting of Hill House.
Haunting of Hill House. Really sad and, disturbing, but also really creepy in moments. Really eerie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've not seen that one because it got bundled in with a lot of the sort of horror movies that I don't like, the horror movies where it feels like people are doing it as a stepping stone to do something that they really want to do. I can't remember what the one was called. Was it Trey Schultz? It Comes at Night, I think it was called.
Yeah, I think...
Am I getting that name right?
I know the one you mean, yeah. It Comes at Night.
It got bundled in with that, and I really disliked that movie, so I just sort of... It was guilty by association, really, without giving it a chance.
Well, I don't know about you, Will. Kat, have you seen Relic?
Yes, I have. Yeah, saw it for whatever festival was on it.
Yeah, I think my feeling of it was that it didn't feel like the way you described it, Rob, and maybe Kat will. What do you think? It felt very genuine.
I think so. Yeah,
this was a filmmaker doing what she wanted.
Yeah, definitely. You could tell there was not a passion project, but you could tell there was definitely she was saying what she wanted to say. There was. Yeah, I don't think it was how you said, Rob. I think it is a genuinely great film. And I did the same, to be honest. I just, because it's a bit of a generic title as well, Relic, I just assumed it was a haunted house film, that kind of thing. So I don't know. So I left it, and then, but now I wish I'd watched it sooner. Because it's one of my favourite I watched, not new films, but watches this year. I really loved it.
Well, you've won me over. So yeah, I think I'll give that a blast. Yeah. Vincent.
Yes. Rob,
anything?
Hi. I'm a couple of things I saw in the past week. I've had some very good fortune lately with French films. Last time I was on, I spoke about Benedetta, which is partially French and it is in French. But in the past week, I have seen a great documentary and a great drama, both from France. The documentary is The Velvet Queen, which is a documentary about these two guys. One of them is a filmmaker. One of them is a wildlife photographer. So they're both filmmakers, but slightly different sorts. And it's about their journey into Tibet to film the snow leopard, which is famously an incredibly elusive animal. And any footage of a snow leopard is tremendously exciting. And so what's interesting is the documentary is as much about the relationship between these two guys in the wilderness, and there are some absolutely incredible visuals where you've got the frame is sort of, it's half land and half sky, which sounds so trite to say, but it is captured in such a way that it is, okay, this is going to sound hyperbolic, but I genuinely mean it when I say this is a sublime visual poem. It communicates so much through images, despite having, constant, well, not constant, but throughout there's voiceover, which is of course subtitled into English, but despite the human voices, it is bringing across this beauty of nature, and it's kind of also an ode to the power of the image and this wonderful kind of wonder, indeed, of wildlife itself, because we only get glimpses of them. We see maybe they find the snow leopard. They do. It'd be a bit silly to say it's a film about filming snow leopard, and there is no snow leopard. But there are also bears. They also encounter local people. There's some moments with foxes, and some of the this enormous vulture at one point. It is. I've always been a huge fan of wildlife documentaries, but this is not like your David Attenborough stuff. It is from the producers, I think, of March of the Penguins, so that might be the closest comparison. But it is as I say, it is moving, it is haunting, and it is sublime. I was completely swept up in it.
Excellent.
So if you want to see some mountains looking amazing, I recommend The Velvet Queen. And then the other French film, very different and extremely topical. As I'm sure we're all aware, right now the US Supreme Court is determining, and may already have, and has drafted apparently, a determination about the Roe v. Wade case, concerning a woman's right to abortion.
Yes.
And fittingly, the other French film I saw is Happening, which is an unflinching and unsentimental look at an unwanted pregnancy and what do you do with it. It's set in France in the early 1960s, when abortion was completely illegal. If a woman had an abortion, she would go to prison. If a doctor performed an abortion, they'd go to prison. If somebody helped either of these people with the abortion, they'd go to prison. And this teenage girl, she gets pregnant, and she is trying to find ways to deal with it, and every way she turns, doors are being slammed in her face. What's quite remarkable here is this is a film not afraid to present things on screen that are seriously not pretty, and there are some very harrowing moments of desperation and, well, I won't spoil it or, don't want to trigger anyone, but yeah, it's got some very harrowing scenes. But at the same time, it also manages to be a very beautiful and touching film, and it's very grounded. It feels very lived in, and I can't recommend it enough. So two very different French films there, a beautiful documentary and a beautiful drama, one of which will make you say, oh God, nature is amazing, and the other will make you say, human beings are so fucking horrible.
Yes. Were you double bill with the sadness then, maybe? I don't know.
Could be.
Very different end of the spectrum, but same emotion.
Yeah.
Kat?
Yeah, well, quickly back to snow leopards. I hand fed some snow leopards at Paradise Wildlife Park a few years back. Yeah,
cool.
It's
very cool.
Having house cats, I can honestly say it was easier to hand feed a snow leopard than it is to feed my own cats. So, but yeah, the other thing, I went to the cinema and I saw the new Doctor Strange.
Okay.
I kind of thought maybe that might have come up from some other people, but I mean, I'm not. It was fine. There's been so many Marvel films now that I am one of these people that has got Marvel fatigue. But I kind of feel I'm so far into it now. I've got to get through. It's like Supernatural was really good for like the first 5 or 6 seasons, and then it fell off a cliff. But I hung in there for all 15 seasons, and I kind of feel like that's a little bit what I'm doing with Marvel. You know, I'm sort of going out of obligation rather than anticipation. And this was very much that for me. And it also sets a dangerous precedent now where you really do have to watch the Disney Plus shows. Because if you haven't watched WandaVision, I think you're going to get confused about where her character is, because there's a lot of, although it's Doctor Strange, it's very much also a Wanda Maximoff film as well. And if you've missed out on WandaVision, you're just going to be like, oh, why is she like that? So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Then again, if you've not seen WandaVision, you're kind of missing out anyway.
Well, yeah, but then it's like, so like, whatever, a Thor, are we going to have to have seen like all of Loki, and then, whatever the next one, Guardians 3, are we going to have to have watched, Moon Knight or whatever? And it's just this dangerous, there's only so many hours in the day, and there's only so much content I can consume, and I don't want it all to be Marvel, so.
I think the biggest problem with Marvel is there's so much in a year. I think if it was a bit more gentle in the way it was pushed out, rather than there's 2-3 series this year, and about the same, if not more, movies. It's just a lot.
Yeah, well, the new Thor's just around the corner.
Yep. So
sort of like Doctor Strange will just be out of the cinemas, and then that one will be going into cinemas. So it's a lot to handle. But it was, if you enjoyed the other, Marvel films, it's more of the same. There's some fun cameos. They're not quite to the level of in No Way Home, but there's some fun cameos for people to enjoy.
I mean, is Bruce Campbell in it? I mean, it's a Sam Raimi movie. He's got to be there somewhere.
Well, I mean, I can neither confirm nor deny, but there's obviously it's the multiverse of madness. So there's other characters and versions of characters that turn up, which I think if you got the right audience will get a big reaction. I mean, I was sort of in a Friday tea time, and there weren't necessarily many people that understood who some of the people were, so it kind of fell a bit flat. And then the only other thing that I've been watching is I made myself rewatch the most terrifying episode of The X-Files ever, which is the season 4 episode Home.
Yeah.
It's for See?
I'm not super up on X-Files. It's been a while. Is that the one with the slimy guy who crawls between the walls?
No, this is
that's mine. That's mine.
Eugene Toombs.
Squeeze, and that's probably mine.
Yeah, it's Squeeze. That's Eugene. Yeah, Eugene Toombs, squeeze, and then he comes back for Toombs. But no, Home is it's a family of inbred brothers, and Mulder and Scully come to investigate a dead body of a baby that had just been born, that had been buried alive. And they believe, I mean, it's been out for years, they believe that the brothers have kidnapped a woman to breed this child with, but it actually turns out that it's their quadriplegic mother, who they keep on a board underneath the bed and wheel her out when she says it's time to mate. And I remember watching it when I was like 14, and it came with a warning from my mum, because my mum would record them on video while she watched them, and she'd give them me the next day. And this one came with a warning from my mum going, I really don't think you want to watch this episode. And I was like, no, we're talking about it's Mulder and Scully, I'll be fine. And then like literally the teaser happened, and I was like, I should not be watching this episode. And it's always stuck with me, and I've watched it a few times over the years, and it still makes my skin crawl. And watching it now, having had a child, it just made it even this whole other layer of awfulness to it. But you say it's for a piece that I'm writing, so hopefully.
Yeah, I remember watching that when it went out as well, and I rewatched it recently because it popped up on I can't remember the podcast they were talking about it.
Evolution of Horror, probably.
It's so dark, possibly, yeah, and it's so dark. It's still quite, considering X-Files was the biggest show at the time, it was massive, and it goes to some really dark places, that episode. Yeah. Because I was a super X-Files super fan for a while when it was first being shown. So yeah, I do remember watching that one and being quite taken aback, and yeah, rewatching it, it's still the same. I mean, yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, it really is. No, I was a big X-Files nerd. My mum went through a phase of wanting to dye her own hair, but she didn't want to ruin her hair, so she dyed my hair instead. So she was like, "But you can go red. You can be like Scully."
Parents, eh?
So that's how she got away with ruining my hair.
I can't really pick up after that, but the other thing I wanted to talk about was other Scandinavian movie by Thomas Daniskov called Wild Men. This one is about how a middle-aged Dane goes... He's had enough. He has a midlife crisis, so his solution to that midlife crisis is to vanish into Norway and be a Viking and live off the land. But he's not equipped for that in any way whatsoever. As far as people using bow and arrows, he's the most inept person I've ever seen in my life. It's quite something. Meanwhile, in that story, there's also I think the drug dealers, they've had a hit, or they've had a big sale, or they've done something, and they're trying to get out of the country. And what should they do but crash into a massive elk, moose, and it seemingly kills two of them. The one survivor walks off, goes into the hills, and who should he meet? The terrible wilderness man. And it's an interesting movie in the sense of it's about being grateful for what you have, even when you do terrible decisions and make terrible decisions throughout your life. But it's also a crime thriller. Thriller's a bit of a stretch. It's a very, very low-key crime movie. And it's the melding of those two things together which is a little bit awkward, I feel. It's an interesting film, but it's just too much film for this film.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Each individual part would make a good movie on its own, but put them together and it's less than the sum of its parts, unfortunately. I don't think there's any well-known Scandinavian actors in it, really. Oh, yes. If you've seen The Last Kingdom, what's he called? Have we? Upa, I think he was called in the first series. Rune Temti, big, burly beast of a mountain of a man. He's probably the most well-known person in it. He's kind of an indie Norwegian movie, Danish movie. I'm getting lots of blank expressions.
Oh, the titles ring a bell, but that's about it.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody want to pick up the mood for a final little sort of bite-size mention?
I've just started watching, speaking of television that'll make your skin crawl, I've started watching Severance on Apple TV. I've only 3 episodes in, and it's like, oh God, I recognise so much of this from places I've worked. Not literally, but it's awfully similar. Yeah. So, if you want to see, workplace drama metaphors that will probably be quite familiar, Severance is one to check out.
From Ben Stiller as well. Surprising sauce.
Well, yes, seems that way, except at the same time, if you want something that's going to be powerful and hard-hitting, then someone who is familiar, a comedian, is going to be one of the best people to deliver it, because no one goes into comedy who's in a good place.
Well, no, that is true. Anything else? Any final
I don't think so.
Bite-sized mentions? Anybody?
I've watched a lot of... Yeah, I've watched Silent Hill and Resident Evil for another podcast recently, because we're doing video game horror films. So that was... Silent Hill was better than I remember. Resident Evil was not better than I remember. So
just the first one? Because Resident Evil gets a bit long in the tooth with those movies.
Yes. Although I think my favourite thing when I was researching it was that Mila Jovovich in one of the featurettes says, come watch Resident Evil, you get me in a wet mini dress with a gun, what more could you want? So, she understood the assignment when she was marketing that film.
It's what happened to Paul W.S. Anderson. He made Event Horizon.
Every film that she's been in since.
And then everything after it is come and look at my wife. And that's his entire filmography. It's quite something. Yes, excellent. So, Will, where can we find you online?
Just Twitter at the moment, just Will Chich. And I am on Instagram as well, but I don't really post on there. But Twitter.
Okay. Vincent?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram and Letterboxd at Dr. Gain. That's DRGAINE. And you can also hear me on Invasion of the Poddy People, a monthly genre podcast. Next episode coming out soon.
Excellent. And Kat?
So I am at Gizmo Shikari on most social medias, including Letterboxd. Most of my writing is for thehollywoodnews.com, though I am sort of moving out into other areas. And if you want to see what or hear what I thought about Silent Hill and Resident Evil, that will be on a forthcoming episode of Ghoul Friends Pod.
Excellent. And I have been your host, Rob Simpson, and that was Directors Uncut.